Oh boy, here we go, Rebel Assault for the Sega CD. Man, this looks like shit. Clearly this one hasn't aged well. At all. But let's get into it. About two folks might recall that I had done a review of this game's sequel, Star Wars Rebel Assault 2 The Hidden Empire, the custom PlayStation edition. Yeah, that's what they called it. About 2 years ago I did that review. The game was not the best of its kind. The flying levels with the finicky controls might contribute to that a bit. But it had its moments, and if you're willing to overcome the game's pitfalls, there's a bit of fun to be had here. I might actually revisit that game one of these days. The original Rebel Assault, on the other hand, was a game I never really cared about. Perhaps this has something to do with the fact that the game's first levels featured said flying levels and immediately showed off some issues with the controls. The ship will slowly veer towards the side when left to its own devices, and you have to constantly keep moving with the D-pad to keep it centered. Itself an incredible feat of strength because the controls will oftentimes do its damnedest not to respond. It's a problem that was also prevalent in Rebel Assault 2, but it seems much worse here. It also doesn't help matters that the level just plain looks like crap. Instead of flying through Beggar's Canyon as advertised, it looks like you're flying through a canyon of fecal matter. I'm not just saying that to be cute or funny or disgusting or anything of the sort. It's really just what it looks like to me. This first level alone does more to emphasize the glaring issues with Rebel Assault in terms of gameplay and presentation than any extended periods of play will ever do. Beyond that, Rebel Assault does vary the gameplay with multiple styles of play. Whether it be a first-person rail shooter where your craft flies through video sequences while you shoot down TIE fighters, or this overhead sequence where you maneuver your ship through more video, or this third-person shooter sequence which is nothing fantastic, or the dreaded flying levels of garbage. Aside from the flying levels, controlling your crosshairs in cockpit view or your ship in the overhead view is pretty simple and straightforward. You do have to be careful during the overhead ship view if your controls are set to flight, because it still applies to this mode. Oftentimes I would press down to pull back, but end up thrusting forward into a brick wall and take damage that should have been avoided. Once you get around that little hurdle, you should be fine. Besides that, the game offers about 14 levels of play. Some of these are the stupid flying missions, but there are also real shooter sequences tackling Star Destroyers, navigating through an asteroid field, deep space dogfights, and finally a recreation of that Death Star trench run that has been done countless times before. I think it's the Death Star trench run at least. I can't honestly tell because this looks like garbage. Now it should be noted that the Sega CD version is missing a level, the one with the probe droids. But you do get to fight Imperial walkers, I guess. Unfortunately, walkers in this game are not very exciting. I kind of prefer the Super Nintendo version and Super Empire Strikes Back. Hell, even the Atari VCS version made downing AT-ATs fun. That's mostly because those games were adapting a sequence from a movie. Rebel Assault has it just for the sake of having it. That's the thing. There's no real story aside from a very loose retelling of Star Wars, only adapting basic plot points and featuring no other familiar characters aside from Darth Vader and a couple other folks here and there for good measure. I mean, you go through training, you're tackling a Star Destroyer, then you're in a desert, then an asteroid field, then you're fighting AT-ATs, and I mean, oh man, I need a drink. Shit, my cup's empty. Damn it. Rebel Assault is one of the earliest CD-ROM games, and its constant use of full-screen pre-rendered video could be seen as something quite impressive back in the day. However, whatever technical brilliance exuded by the PC version is clearly not present in this Sega CD iteration. To the game's credit, the various objects such as TIE fighters and other craft do blend in nicely with the grainy FMVs, so it doesn't look out of place. However, the common problem with many FMV games of the time is the grainy quality of the video. Back in the day, this was somewhat cutting edge. Now it just looks dated, ugly, and virtually unwatchable. This is an issue that has been prevalent on many Sega CD games especially, but even more so on Rebel Assault. There are instances where the game looks alright, but ultimately the overall product looks pretty shit in general and has the unfortunate misfortune of not having aged well over the years. I should probably mention that Rebel Assault has 3 difficulty settings. These not only determine how much damage you'll take, but will also give you target indicators, and on easy mode, clues to where to steer to avoid damage. On hard mode, these helpful tools are removed, leaving you to try and play Where's Waldo with finding destructible turrets on a Star Destroyer while getting pelted with laser fire because everything's just a pixelated mess. Just makes the game borderline unbearable at this point, given the fact that, again, it's often hard to make out what's on screen. This is especially prevalent on the later Death Star levels, which are full of undecipherable pixels on screen. It's pretty bad. Then again, the original PC CD-ROM version of Rebel Assault didn't age all that well either, but at the very least, the video quality was a lot more tolerable than it is here. Now, this being a CD game, you figure sound quality would be top-notch, but not necessarily the case with Rebel Assault. Though the game uses the John Williams composed soundtrack of Star Wars, and yes, back in the day we called it Star Wars and not A New Hope, the music tracks are a pitch higher than normal and have this somewhat rough quality to it. It's kind of hard to explain, but it doesn't sound crisp and clear. Sort of sounds rough a bit, like it's off a tape player or something. Even the sound effects have this somewhat low quality feel to it. Maybe it's due to the hardware, and in fairness, the sound is good enough for what it is, but I can't help but shake the feeling that sound could have been a lot better, or at least a bit better. Rebel Assault was a technical achievement for its time, being one of the earliest CD-ROM titles to make full use of the medium. At least on the PC end. Unfortunately, Rebel Assault isn't necessarily a good game by any stretch of the imagination. Truth be told, hasn't really aged all that well. I might have mentioned that once or twice. The flight levels are a nuisance, the video is grainy and blurry to the point of being indistinguishable, and really, Rebel Assault is more of a tech demo than anything else, I think. Something to sell people on the then brand spanking new CD-ROM technology, but they ultimately forgot to make the game fun or even memorable. In all honesty, if you really want a piece of the Rookie 1 pie, I would suggest tracking down Rebel Assault 2 for either the PC or PlayStation. While it's not much better than this one, actually, that's understating it a bit. It's a much more polished game overall, and it does offer a little more than what the Sega CD game can put out. The original Rebel Assault serves more as a curiosity piece or a historical footnote than anything else, but as a video game in general, especially on the Sega CD, it falls rather flat. You know what, all things considered, maybe I should revisit the sequel. It's starting to look a little better than before. Well, I might do that.